The license and registration. The officer leans in, squinting. Can't even speak straight, huh? What's the matter, boy? Nervous? Or just slow? The man in the hoodie looks up, eyes calm. He reaches into his back pocket, pulls out a black leather badge. Not a regular badge, a gold shield of internal affairs. The cop's jaw tightens. Silence. The rain is the only sound now. Still think I'm slow? Cut to black. Narrator whispers, "Some people mock what they don't understand, until the truth walks through the front door." To understand that moment, you need to know where Jordan Bell came from. Because the badge he carried wasn't forged in comfort. It was built in silence, in stutters, in years of being dismissed. Say it again, Jordan. Third grade, chalkboard, sweat down his spine. The word was courage, but all that came out was k-k-k. Laughter erupted behind him. Not cruel, at least not in their minds. Just kids being kids. But to Jordan, it felt like knives. Every syllable stuck in his throat carved a deeper scar on his will to speak. He was the quiet one. The boy who raised his hand last, even when he knew the answer. The one who rehearsed hello 5 times before picking up a phone. The one who didn't fight back when teachers called on someone else, because Jordan takes too long. What they didn't see, he was watching, listening, memorizing every word, every tone, every room. By the time he reached high school, Jordan had mastered the art of invisibility. He passed hallways like a shadow. No drama, no noise. Just notebooks full of plans, patterns, and power he hadn't yet tapped. But inside, a storm brewed. If I couldn't say it fast, I'd say it better. If they wouldn't hear me, I'd make them listen. College was brutal. Public speaking class nearly broke him. Every tremor in his voice was magnified under fluorescent lights. But something strange happened. One professor didn't look away. Professor Hardy, a retired federal investigator, saw something. He pulled Jordan aside one evening. "You think a voice has to be perfect to be powerful? Let me tell you, son. The strongest men I've ever met were the ones who didn't need to raise their voice at all." That night changed something. Not everything, but enough. Jordan stopped hiding, started applying, FBI internship, criminology track, law enforcement psych. He read internal affairs manuals cover to cover, twice. He didn't want the spotlight. He wanted the leverage. He wanted to walk into the rooms where decisions were made and say, "I know how this game works, and I'm done playing." By the time he was 28, Jordan Bell was the quiet storm, assigned to internal affairs. Not flashy, not loud. But when he showed up, people listened. Because he knew the silence between words was where the truth often hid. But silence, it's only powerful if you choose when to break it. And Jordan, he chose the exact moment, in the exact town, with the exact officer, to finally be heard. Phew, he walks different. Talks funny too. Watch him. He's probably up to something. These weren't whispers. They were spoken out loud, out in the open, by men in uniform. Jordan Bell walked down 8th and Mercer with his hoodie up, hands visible, phone in his left pocket, notebook in his right. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he was looking for patterns. Maple Heights was one of those places. You know the kind, quiet, polite, gentrified on the outside, but under the surface, a simmering tension. 3 complaints in 6 months, Same department, same precinct, same type of traffic stops, all dismissed. Lack of evidence, lack of reasonable suspicion. But Jordan wasn't looking for what they filed. He was looking for what they buried. He took a room at a local inn. Nothing flashy. A bed, a lamp, a window that didn't quite lock. Each morning, he'd walk to the same coffee shop, order the same thing, small black, 2 sugars, sit at the same bench near the corner. He wanted to be seen, but not remembered. His stutter was part of the cover. It wasn't fake, but he amplified it just enough to fit the profile. If they think I'm weak, they'll show me who they really are. It didn't take long. Day 2, 11:47 a.m. He crossed the corner of Pine and 6th. A cruiser rolled up slow. "Hey, you there. What's your name?" Jordan turned, eyes lowered, voice soft. Jordan." The officer stepped out, smirking. "You all right, man? You sound like you need help." Jordan nodded. No, sir, I'm good." "Where you headed?" Just walking." A second officer got out, leaned against the hood. "He's either high or slow. Or both." Laughter. One of them circled behind him. Jordan stayed still. Inside, his pulse stayed steady. His camera, hidden in his backpack, recorded every word. "What's in the bag?" "Books." The first officer reached in, pulled out the notebook, flipped it open. Inside? Nothing but handwriting, names, times, places. "You write like a girl." Another laugh. They handed it back and waved him off. "Stay out of trouble, Stutter man." Jordan walked on, not angry, not shaken. He'd gotten exactly what he came for. That night, he reviewed the footage. Not just what they said, but how they said it. Tone, posture, who looked around, who didn't care. He logged it all. This wasn't a stop. It was a ritual. They'd done it before. They'd do it again. Day 3, same routine. But this time, a different officer. Sergeant Rick Danner. Clean record. Commendations. Loved by his unit. But his eyes? Cold. Calculating. He walked up as Jordan waited for the light to change. "Got ID, champ?" Jordan handed over his card. Danner looked it over. "This ain't local." "No, new in town." "Yeah? You looking for a job?" "You got that look." Jordan smiled slightly. "Nah, not yet. I'll tell you what. Maybe stay off this block. Just some friendly advice." Then, as he turned to leave, Danner muttered, "Sick of these damn slow-talking types clogging up our streets." Jordan stood still, didn't flinch, didn't respond. But inside, the moment locked in place. That was the trigger. That was the voice they used when they thought no one was listening. Except this time, someone was. That evening, Jordan called DC. "I've got 4 stops, 3 recordings, 1 direct insult from a sergeant. I think we're ready to escalate." But recording the truth isn't the same as confronting it. Jordan didn't just want them caught. He wanted to look them in the eye and make sure they remembered the day they mocked the wrong man. It wasn't about revenge, not for Jordan. He wasn't interested in public humiliation or personal glory. He wanted accountability, the kind that couldn't be erased with a statement or hidden behind legal jargon. To get it, he needed one more thing: proximity. The call to Internal Affairs came through at 6:02 a.m. "Green light. You're authorized to reveal after next contact, on your terms." It meant one more encounter. One more chance to let them show who they were, when they thought they were still in control. Jordan closed his notebook, buttoned up the hoodie, walked outside like every other morning. But this time, He was carrying two things: a hidden recorder in his collar, the badge, his real one, in his back pocket. He returned to the same bench, same coffee, same time. And like clockwork, the black and white patrol car drifted into view. Danner again, only this time he had two new officers with him. Trainees, fresh uniforms, eager eyes. Jordan knew the type. They followed cues, mirrored behavior, and Rick Danner had a stage. "Morning, Stutter boy." Jordan didn't flinch. He looked up with the same soft nod. "Shiha hi. You still lurking around my block?" The younger officers chuckled. Jordan let the moment stretch. Danner stepped closer. The camera on his vest blinked red. Recording. "You ever think about getting help for that mouth of yours?" Jordan tilted his head as if thinking. You mean therapy?" "No, I mean, like, maybe just stop talking altogether." One of the rookies laughed, nervous, unsure if it was a joke or a test. Danner noticed. He liked the power, so he pushed further. "I bet you never made it past 9th grade with that voice. What do you do, huh? Sweep streets? You a janitor?" Jordan stared at him. Longer than usual. No stutter, no smile, just a look. "No. I investigate you." Silence. Danner blinked. "What did you say?" Jordan reached into his back pocket, pulled out the black wallet, unfolded it, let the gold badge gleam in the morning light. Internal Affairs, Federal Clearance, Division 14. "You're on record, Sergeant. This conversation, the last three, the bag search, the threats, every word." The rookie's face went pale. The other took a step back. Danner didn't speak. His eyes darted from badge to body cam to the street around them. But there was nowhere to go. No curtain to pull shut. No story to rewrite. "You thought I was slow because I didn't match your idea of strength, because I paused between words, because I didn't look you in the eye. But I was watching the whole time." Jordan stepped forward. "Now I'm here, with a badge, with evidence, and with silence you won't be able to laugh off this time." Rick tried to speak. This is entrapment." "No. This is what happens when someone listens for long enough." Jordan turned to the rookies. "You were watching a man sink his own ship. You still want to sail with him?" Neither replied. That night, the footage made its way to Internal Affairs headquarters. Chain of command was activated, review boards scheduled, badges suspended, and Rick Danner removed from patrol, pending full investigation. But for Jordan, this wasn't closure. Not yet. The badge protected him now. But as a boy, he had no such shield. He still remembered the school counselors, the job interviews, the store clerks, all the "you should learn to speak better" moments, all the "come back when you're more confident" smiles. It's not just about what they said, it's about what the world still believes. Jordan wanted more than a nameplate taken off a desk. He wanted a system reset. But before you change a system, you have to understand how deep its roots grow. And Jordan, he was about to find out that Rick Danner was just the mask. Behind him was something far darker. Rick Danner wasn't the disease. He was just a symptom. What Jordan discovered next was that the real sickness wore a smile, signed off paperwork, and sat behind polished desks. The preliminary review led to a deeper audit, and that's when it started to unravel. 6 years of patterns, stops with no probable cause, ticket quotas quietly enforced, officers rotated out just before formal complaints could stick, names shuffled, files lost, footage corrupted, and all roads led to one name: Captain Everett Lorne. Lorne had never once been written up. He gave speeches at City Hall, volunteered at youth events, received a Community Hero Award just last month. But Jordan had seen this before. Sometimes the most dangerous men knew how to shake hands with one and tighten the leash with the other. He dug deeper. Lorne had authorized over 220 stops in the last 18 months. 94% were people of color. Only 4 resulted in arrest. 0 had body cam footage that made it past internal servers, and there was a memo, stamped and dated. Verbal clarity issues may indicate deception. Officers should proceed with elevated caution. Jordan read it 3 times. It wasn't just cruel, it was policy. So he requested a meeting. Face to face. Lorne agreed. Monday morning, 9:00 a.m., captain's office. Sunlight pouring in through glass windows. Jordan entered without his hoodie this time. Pressed suit, badge visible, voice steady. Captain Lorne. Agent Bell, please have a seat. The man smiled like a politician. Warm, confident, not a crack in the mask. I read the reports. Very unfortunate about Sergeant Danner. We'll address it swiftly. Jordan didn't sit. He placed a file on the desk. Your name's in those reports, more than once. Lorne leaned back, hands folded. I review every report in this department. My name ends up in a lot of places. It's called leadership. Jordan didn't blink. Leadership doesn't look away when people get hurt. The temperature in the room shifted, subtle, controlled. You're a passionate man, Agent Bell, but there's a difference between injustice and discomfort. I suggest you learn it. Jordan stepped closer, pulled out a second folder, thicker, older. This one's from 2014. Do you remember Jerome Knox? Lorne didn't answer. Stuttered worse than I ever did. You pulled him over for suspicious hesitation. He was cuffed, held for 6 hours, then released. No charges. That report was sealed under your approval. The smile dropped. Just for a second. But Jordan saw it. The mask slipped. Barely. But it was enough. You're not here because you're threatened. You're here because the old tactics stopped working. Because someone finally recorded what silence couldn't hide anymore. Lorne stood. You think this department runs on fairness, it runs on rhythm, and you just broke it. Good. Jordan walked out. He didn't slam the door, didn't make a scene. He didn't have to. He had the tapes, the files, the proof. And this time, the silence would echo all the way to the state board. By Thursday, the story leaked. An anonymous whistleblower, a leaked policy memo, a photo of the verbal clarity line circled in red. Twitter lit up. So did cable news. Lorne canceled 2 public events. City Hall scheduled a review, and Jordan, he didn't give interviews, didn't post anything. He went for a walk, back down 8th and Mercer. This time, no cruisers slowed down. No one stared. No one smirked. For the first time in years, he walked like a man who didn't need to speak to be heard. But for every lie exposed, there are 10 more hiding in the dark. And as the cameras turned to Jordan, he realized the world wasn't just listening. It was waiting to see what he'd say next. Jordan didn't want to be a symbol. He wasn't chasing hashtags or headlines. He didn't need applause. He needed change. But change doesn't wait for your permission. And when the footage hit national media, Jordan Bell became something he didn't ask for, a voice. For everyone who ever stumbled over a sentence and got dismissed. For every black man pulled over for looking nervous. For every kid told, "You talk too weird to be taken seriously." The inbox at Internal Affairs flooded. Calls, tips, stories. People who had never spoken before started to speak. People who had been laughed at, silenced, profiled, now saw in Jordan someone who didn't just survive it. He weaponized it. A week later, Jordan was asked to speak at a private law enforcement summit. Closed door, no cameras, all high-ranking brass. He almost said no. But then he remembered third-grade Jordan, standing at the chalkboard, fighting to say courage, and he said yes. The room was quiet, some skeptical, some curious, some just checking boxes. Jordan stepped up. No teleprompter, no script, just breath and truth. I stuttered as a child. I stutter now, but that never stopped me from knowing what I wanted to say. When I joined this profession, I thought if I worked harder, stayed quieter, followed the rules, I could earn respect. But silence never protected me. It just made them forget I was there. He paused. No one moved. The system we inherited rewards fluency, not just in speech, but in appearance, in attitude, in fitting the mold. But justice doesn't have a mold, and if your badge only protects the loudest voice in the room, it's not protecting anyone. There was no applause, just silence. The good kind, the kind that meant they were listening, really listening. That night, back in his apartment, Jordan sat alone. No news on, no emails, just him. A notepad, a single word written at the top, legacy. Because something had shifted. This wasn't just about Rick Danner anymore, or Captain Lorne, or a leaked memo. This was about rewriting the playbook. Not just for stutterers, not just for black men, for anyone who had ever been reduced to a single trait. And judged for it. The next morning, Jordan sent a proposal to the Federal Oversight Committee, a mandatory training module on verbal bias, including speech impairments, regional accents, and processing delays. Required review of body cam footage through the lens of tone, not just legality. Promotion evaluation must include interpersonal respect scores, not just quotas. No one replied. Not for 2 days. But then, the director of officer development called. It's bold. It'll ruffle feathers. Good, Jordan said. Policy is slow, painfully slow. But Jordan knew how to wait. He'd waited his whole life to be heard. Now he wasn't waiting anymore. He returned to Maple Heights. Not undercover, not recording. He went back as himself. He visited the coffee shop, the street corner, the bench, and there, he saw the 2 rookie cops. They froze when they saw him. But Jordan just nodded. What you do next will define what kind of badge you wear. Then he walked on. Jordan had cracked the armor, but underneath every policy, every law, every badge, there's still a beating heart. And hearts don't change with memos. They change when they see something that won't let them forget. Sometimes, the loudest thing in a room is the person who refuses to shout. After everything, the footage, the fallout, the interviews Jordan turned down, they asked him to speak again. This time, not to officers, to cadets, fresh recruits, 22 to 25 years old. Clean uniforms, eyes full of fire, fear, and ambition. He stood in front of them. A single stool, no podium, no slideshow, just him, and the pause before he spoke. Raise your hand if you joined this job to make a difference. Every hand went up. Now keep it raised if you're ready to be uncomfortable doing it. The room got still. Only a few hands stayed up. Jordan nodded. Good, because comfort won't get you truth, and truth is what justice bleeds for. He told them about hesitation, not just in speech but in action. How some of the worst moments happen in the gaps between what's said and what's assumed, between the uniform and the humanity underneath it. between power and empathy. I was once told I'd never make it in this field because of my stutter, because I couldn't give commands fast enough. But I didn't join to give commands. I joined to ask better questions. One cadet in the back raised her hand. What do you do when a partner crosses the line, but you're the rookie? Jordan paused, looked her in the eyes. You speak, even if your voice shakes, even if your career trembles, because silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the problem. There was no applause when he finished. He hadn't asked for it. But when he walked out of the academy, 3 cadets followed. One asked if he could intern with internal affairs. Another said her little brother stuttered, and she'd never once thought what that meant for his safety. The third didn't say anything, just nodded and cried. Later that week, Jordan received a letter, handwritten, folded neatly in a plain envelope. It read, I used to think my silence was weakness, watching you. I realized it was power waiting to be used. Thank you. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. He kept it tucked inside his badge case, not as a trophy, but as a reminder, stillness is not absence. Stillness is presence without panic. Stillness is what comes before change. Not every battle needed a raised voice. Some just needed someone to refuse to look away. And that's what Jordan kept doing. Every time someone rolled their eyes when he stumbled, every time someone tried to interrupt, every time a young recruit hesitated to speak up, he stood, still, unmoved. Not because he was trying to make a scene, but because his presence was already won. But presence is only half the story. The other half is how the world responds. And when the story leaked beyond law enforcement, the public had something to say. And this time, they were finally listening to the quiet ones. It started as a whisper, a tweet, a repost, a stitched TikTok. Then it turned into something else. Clips from Jordan's internal affairs footage, blurred and redacted, made it to the internet. His voice, calm and stuttering, overlaid with the badge reveal. People weren't laughing. They were standing. Stand with Jordan trended for 4 days, not because of how he exposed the system, but how he carried himself while doing it. Calm, measured, unapologetic. Influencers talked about it. So did lawyers. So did speech pathologists. And parents of children who stuttered. And teachers who'd once told those kids to just try harder. Suddenly, Jordan Bell wasn't just a federal agent. He was a mirror, and people began to see themselves in the reflection. An email came in from a mother in Detroit. My son was pulled over last year. He couldn't speak fast enough. They thought he was hiding something. They dragged him out. He still has nightmares. Thank you for showing the world that courage doesn't sound like they expect it to. Then a letter from a 7th grade teacher. I changed my curriculum after watching your video. I now teach communication diversity as part of every lesson. My kids don't laugh at stutters anymore. They lean in. Even the National Association for Stuttering reached out. They wanted Jordan to keynote their annual conference. He declined. Not because he didn't care, but because he believed the story should outgrow the storyteller. Instead, he offered to train their advocacy staff on bias recognition in law enforcement, quietly, behind the scenes. Let others hold the mic now. Jordan had other work to do. And yet, the echo grew. A university professor compiled his case as a new model for modern civil service ethics. A filmmaker reached out for rights. A senator quoted him in a bill about body cam reforms. Jordan didn't chase any of it. He just kept showing up to work. Same office, same badge, same mission. But something had changed. When he walked into precincts now, junior officers didn't roll their eyes. They stood straighter. They paid attention. And in IA meetings, people didn't talk over him anymore. They waited. They listened. Because when Jordan spoke, it wasn't about dominance. It was about truth that didn't need to shout to hit you in the chest. The echo, however, wasn't just external. Inside Jordan, something softened. He started replying to those letters. Not all, but the ones that felt unfinished. He met with parents, with kids who stuttered, with black youth who thought quiet meant weak. He let them talk. He listened. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't rehearsed. It was just honest. You don't have to change how you speak. You just have to change who gets to define what power sounds like. That sentence ended up printed on a school poster in Baltimore, then painted on a wall in a youth center in Oakland, then tattooed, seriously, tattooed on the arm of a young public defender in Atlanta. Jordan didn't ask for any of that, but he understood it, because power, once awakened in the quiet, doesn't fade. It multiplies. But as the echo turned into momentum, not everyone clapped. Some watched from the shadows, unamused, unshaken, and unwilling to let one voice shift a culture. And they were about to remind Jordan changing the story doesn't mean the story is over. Not everyone was inspired. Some were annoyed. Some were threatened. And a few were quietly planning to shut him down. Change, Jordan had learned, isn't just about policies. It's about pride. And in law enforcement, pride can be territorial. For every rookie who saw him as a role model, there was a veteran who saw him as a traitor. Emails started slowing. Memos Jordan submitted sat untouched. Meeting invites went lost. And then came the review. Officially, it was a standard performance audit. Unofficially, it was retaliation. Questions about his tactics, his overexposure, his violation of interdepartmental decorum. They brought up his badge presentation on the street, called it theatrical. "We're not in the business of spectacle," one supervisor said. Jordan leaned forward. "Neither am I. I'm in the business of truth. If you don't like how it looks, maybe fix what caused it." The room was quiet, but the message was clear. Some people wanted him out of the spotlight, not because he was wrong, but because he had made them look away from the wrong things too long. Then came the station memo. Internal affairs agents must now be escorted during field observations. Jordan's solo patrol privileges revoked. They framed it as a safety concern, but Jordan knew better. They were trying to cage the storm, so he adjusted. He trained other agents, passed his methods to younger staff, encouraged documentation, built a system that couldn't be erased, because it didn't rely on one man. Still, the resistance grew colder. One afternoon, he found his office door marked. Someone had scratched 3 letters into the paint RAT. He didn't report it, didn't erase it. He left it there. Let them see that he saw it. And wasn't moved. But something inside him did shift. He wasn't angry. He was focused. He'd always known this would happen. That real change comes with real friction. And that sometimes progress looks like isolation. So he started something else. Off the books, after hours, a monthly gathering, open to any officer, cadet, or employee who'd ever been mislabeled, overlooked, silenced, or punished for asking questions. They called it the quiet room. No badges, no ranks, just voices, sometimes hesitant, sometimes trembling, sometimes bold. but all of them real. They shared stories, strategies, failures. They rewrote the brotherhood. Not around toughness, but around truth. It grew faster than anyone expected. Not a protest, not a rebellion, just a conversation that refused to die. And while certain officials scowled in closed-door meetings, others started to take notice. A quiet groundswell, whispers of promotions based on emotional intelligence, evaluations rewritten to include bias response. Jordan didn't take credit. He just kept showing up. The scratch on his door stayed for months. Then one day, it was painted over. No note, no acknowledgement, just gone. And in its place, someone had slid a sticky note beneath the door. It read, "I was part of that memo to silence you. I was wrong. Don't stop." Jordan folded the note, put it in the same folder as the unsigned thank you letter. Because truth doesn't just echo, it plants itself. And even where resistance grows, roots still spread. And sometimes, those roots find new soil in the most unexpected places. Because one morning, Jordan received an invitation. Not from a precinct, not from a press outlet, but from the one place that had once silenced him the loudest. A classroom. It was a simple envelope. No agency seal, no official letterhead, just handwriting, neat and clear. "Mr. Bell, we watched the footage in class. The whole room was quiet. They have questions. Would you come speak to them? Mrs. Alcott, Maple Heights Middle School." Jordan hadn't stepped into a middle school since he left one. Not since third grade. Not since the chalkboard. Not since they laughed when he couldn't finish the word courage. He almost said no. Too personal, too raw. But that's the thing about echoes. They come back when you least expect them. He walked into the school on a Tuesday. Same brick walls, same smell of waxed floors, same uneasy feeling in his chest. Only this time, he walked in with a badge, not to flash it, just to carry it, as proof of what was possible. Room 204, 23 kids, 12 boys, 11 girls, one child in a wheelchair, one child with a stutter. He could tell immediately, the way he avoided eye contact, the slight tension before every word. Jordan saw himself, like looking through time. Mrs. Alcott welcomed him. She didn't introduce him as an agent. She just said, "This is Mr. Bell. He knows what it feels like when words don't come easy." That was all. Jordan smiled, took a breath, and began. "I used to think my voice was broken, that something was wrong with me, because other people spoke faster, clearer, louder. But I learned something. Speaking slow doesn't make your thoughts slow. Speaking different doesn't make you less worthy. It just makes your truth harder to ignore." He talked about silence, about walking past bullies, about wanting to disappear, and about the day he stopped trying to change his voice and started using it. One hand went up, a boy in the third row, big glasses, hair combed tight. "What do you do when someone laughs at you?" Jordan looked straight at him. "You let them. Then you keep talking, because their laugh won't outlast your truth." Another hand. "Have you ever been scared to speak?" Jordan smiled softly. "Every time, even now. But I speak anyway, because someone is always listening who needs to know they're not alone." Then the boy with the stutter raised his hand. Slow, shaking. "How? Did you know you could still be so strong?" The room froze. No one laughed. Not anymore. Jordan stepped forward, kneeled beside his desk. "Because the strongest people I've ever known were the ones who didn't give up, even when the world told them they'd never be heard." The boy didn't cry. He just nodded. Once. Hard. like a vow. Afterward, the kids clapped. But it wasn't polite applause. It was loud, unrestrained, because they weren't just clapping for Jordan. They were clapping for themselves, for being seen, for being reminded that voice has nothing to do with volume. As Jordan walked out, Mrs. Alcott caught up to him. "That boy with the stutter, he's barely said 10 words all year." Jordan paused. "He just said 5 more than most grown men ever will." He walked outside, stopped at the gate, turned back, and for the first time, the school didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a circle finally closed. He took a breath. The air was still, but something in it had shifted. Jordan Bell had come full circle, and he wasn't done yet. Jordan never wrote a memoir, never ran for office, never became the face of a movement. But in precincts, in classrooms, in whispered conversations, his story spread. Because sometimes, you don't need to shout to change the world. You just need to speak, and never let them silence you again. Jordan never became famous. No Netflix deal, no book tour, no talk show circuit. He simply returned to the job, returned to the streets, to the case files, to the coffee shops where people were still being watched for the color of their skin or the sound of their voice. But his story, it stayed. In training rooms, where instructors began pausing after offensive jokes. In break rooms, where rookies challenged their superiors respectfully, firmly. In classrooms, where kids now raised their hands even if they needed a moment to get the words out. He didn't need to be in every room. Because his presence, his pause, his patience, his purpose, echoed through those who were. The scratch on his door, gone. But in its place, a new plaque. Justice isn't loud, it's consistent. Agent Jordan Bell, Internal Affairs. And one day, years later, a young cadet walked up to him in D.C. shaky hands, clear eyes. "Sir, I talk slow too," Jordan smiled. "Then say what you came to say. I've got time." The cadet nodded. "I joined because of you, because I realized you don't have to raise your voice to raise the standard." Jordan didn't say much after that. He just placed a hand on the cadet's shoulder. Still. Steady. Enough. Because the goal was never to be heard by millions. The goal was to make sure the next voice didn't have to fight as hard to be heard. He was mocked for how he spoke. He was judged by what they saw. But he stood anyway. And that silence, it roared. Have you ever been told your voice was too quiet, too broken, or too different to matter? Comment one word below to remind the world you're still here. Stand.